Thank you for joining and welcome to this webinar. We are Well Studio Architecture. We are also partners in the co-living industry and the shared living industry with Conscious Co-Living. And this webinar is entitled Designing Student Living for Wellbeing and Community. So before we go into the webinar itself, just a little bit about me. My name is Tom Manuel. I am the founder and director of Well Studio Architecture. I'm a fully qualified UK architect, a member of the RIBA and the ARB. I'm a well-accredited professional, and we'll talk more about the Well Building Standard in a minute. I've got 10 years experience of running my own practice. I'm a co-founder of our partners, Conscious Co-Living, and I've lived in communities all my life. I grew up in London, and from the age of being a student onwards, I lived in really quite large house shares in London, some of them with 12 or more people. And it was during this time that I really got interested and passionate about co-living and the idea of living together in community. And we were young, we had very little money. London is an expensive city, but what we did have was each other. And together we created beautiful events at our house. We had dinner parties, we had garden parties, we had dancing parties. We had 12 amazing, fabulous, wonderful people with very different interests that brought their interests together. And so infinitely interesting conversations and sharing of ideas and thoughts and discussions, doing things together, cooking together, eating together, living together. And there was so much joy and nourishment and value in what we were doing that we didn't need much money, and we had such a great time. And this is really the potential of co-living, to reduce carbon footprints, to bring people together in support networks. So when someone's having a hard time, others are there for them, and to listen to them and to support mental and physical well-being. So I have a family background also in architecture and well-being. My father is also an architect and ran his own practice, and that was designing older people's living accommodation. So in a similar field. So if you'd like to find out more about what we do at Well Studio, you can check out the website here, wellstudiocoliving.com. Follow our Instagram and feel free to send us an email. So moving into the first chapter of today's webinar, this chapter is entitled Well Studio's Shared Living Philosophy. And here I wanted to introduce to you some of the foundational ideas and thinking behind how we design co-living, student living, shared living as a practice. So this Conscious Co-Living Manifesto, which we co-created, shows a kind of holistic idea of a future paradigm of living where people are connected to themselves, each other, and nature. And this really translates into well-being, a home where you can flourish emotionally, mentally, and physically. Sustainability, a way of living that is in harmony with nature and meets the needs of both current and future generations. And community, a group where you feel belonging, communicate authentically, and grow together. And if you want to find out more about this manifesto, you can visit our partners, Conscious Co-Living website, consciouscoliving.com. So that being the foundational underpinning of where we're coming from when we talk about shared living, we then bring in a layer of the Well Building Standard. So the Well Building Standard is a globally recognized standard for the design and operation of buildings to support mental and physical well-being. And in its original form here, version 1, the standard has 7 features. The features are good air quality, good water quality, spaces that facilitate healthy eating and nourishment, good amount of natural light levels and artificial light, which supports the circadian rhythm of the body, spaces which facilitate physical exercise and fitness, spaces which provide thermal comfort and other comfort, and then spaces which support the mind and our kind of brain intellect in different ways. So by bringing this all together, we with the Well Building Standard, we created a great foundational philosophy here as well, and we are actually Well Building Standard accredited professionals at Well Studio, so we've studied this standard, and it's quite a stringent standard. There's a lot of information, scientific background to each of these features, and we passed the exam to become qualified in the Well Building Standard, and we're able to then help building owners, developers, operators to gain Well Building certification for their buildings. So if that's something you're interested in, please do reach out to us. Okay, so the third layer of our design philosophy is Well Studio's 10 elements of well-being co-living design. And this can apply, has been applied to our co-living buildings, but now we're bringing it over to the student living sector, and also bringing the same 10 features or elements to the student living, design of student living buildings, PBSA. So picking up where the Well Building Standard left off, we have natural light, we have good air quality, we have sound, and we have creating good acoustic separation between private and shared spaces, and making sure that community spaces have good acoustics so people can hear each other in conversation. We have warmth and creating good thermal values and insulating buildings well so that they use less energy and are less costly to heat. We have touch and designing spaces with elements which are pleasing to the touch. We have community and designing spaces which support community, and that means supporting both introverts and extroverts. We have nature and designing spaces that connect people to nature in different ways. So whether that be views out to a garden, views up to the sky through roof lights, or bringing plants indoors internally, we connect people to nature in our buildings, and using natural materials, I should say. So natural timber, natural stone, materials which are connecting one to nature through their visual appearance and their touch. And then incorporating sustainability into all of this, this philosophy, so that we choose materials which are sustainably sourced and have a low carbon footprint. And, you know, looking at the cradle to grave cycle of those materials. Aesthetics and designing spaces that have visual harmony, both in their color scheme and their visual appearance, that are calming for the brain to look at and provide a well-being impact. And then spaces that encourage movement. So rather than encouraging access to lifts, we would encourage access to stairs, to access different levels of the building, spaces where people can take exercise and do yoga or do running or do workouts, Pilates, whatever it is, to create space in the building that allow for that. So then the next kind of input into designing a co-living building or a student living building would be looking at the types of people that are going to be in the building. So it's worth looking at, well, what kind of students are actually going to be living in this new student building? Is it mature students? Is it international students? Is it local students? Is it single parent families? So obviously it would probably be a combination of all these kinds of students, but essentially, what's the mix, and what kind of amenities and facilities might you want to have in the building that support that mix? If you've got single parent families, you might need some areas for childcare. Mature students might want slightly different spaces from younger local students, and international students the same. So looking into that, looking into where do these people lie on the introverted to extroverted scale, and what's the kind of combination of introvert and extrovert that you're gonna have in the building, and then what kind of spaces might you want to design. Introverts normally like quieter, smaller spaces. Extroverts prefer spaces where they can have parties and get together and meet each other. And then are there people with disabilities in the building, both physical and learning disabilities, and how might you support those people? And then input 4, looking at what are the glue activities in your student building. So within this student community, which you're designing the building to accommodate, what kind of activities might they want to do together? And we call this the glue. So activities that bring people together in community are called glue. And one of the most common glues is obviously eating, but you could have glue around studying together, or you could glue around socializing together, or you could have glue around playing games together. So consider that. And then you might want to start looking at what are the different scales of this building that is being created. So right from the bedroom scale, the most private scale, through to the cluster scale, where you have several bedrooms arranged around a shared living space, which might be a kitchen, living dining space. It might also be shared bathrooms or not. And the amount of shared space you have in the cluster, you might be looking back to your resident profiles to help inform that, and maybe doing some surveying of students and what their needs are to inform the composition of the cluster. And then these clusters would all combine into the whole building. So floor by floor, you would have maybe different numbers of clusters. And then the building would also have some facilities throughout, which are shared by everybody. And then this building sits within a neighborhood. So then the context of where that building sits and what's around it in terms of other amenities, other types of people, spaces, transport connections, parks, roads, cycle paths, etc., 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 is really worth considering at the initial stage of starting to look at this shared living student building. And then essentially what we've done at Well Studio is brought all of this thinking into a rather clever matrix framework. So essentially here you have the scales of the building: bedroom, cluster, whole building, neighborhood, crossed with the different aspects of Conscious Co-Living's manifesto. So spaces which support well-being, community, and sustainability, and then identified out certain types of space which would fall within these categories. So when you're designing a bedroom, you might, for instance, want to incorporate, to support well-being, a window seat that connects people to the outside tree in the courtyard, and gives them natural light. Or you might want to support sustainability, use natural ventilation rather than having to use air conditioning. And to support community, you might want to create the room as a sanctuary for introverts so they can recharge before they have to go and interact with other people. If you've got a cluster space, you might want to incorporate a community kitchen to support community, or you might want to incorporate curved walls to support well-being, or shared appliances to reduce individual carbon footprints and support sustainability. And then if you've got the whole building scale, you can think about larger elements like a student bar, or study spaces for students that support the community, or a sensory garden, or access decks that support well-being, or shared laundries that support sustainability. So this can be a really good foundation of kind of framework to then look at the design of how you compose your building. Then zooming into some of these individual features, just to give you a bit more insight into how they might support well-being, sustainability, and community. You can see here an example of a window seat. So when someone's sitting in this window seat looking out over the green space, they can get sunlight onto their skin, which provides essential pleasure, but also gives a serotonin boost, a chemical boost to the body. They're connected to the circadian rhythm of the day as day turns to night, or the sun rotates around, and this gives natural indications to the body clock of when we should be awake and when we should be asleep. It helps us sleep well at night and helps us operate well during the day. So it's also having this window seat is what we call a nook. It's a more kind of closed, compact, smaller space off of a larger space, which provides a sense of psychological safety. So when someone's here, they'll naturally feel more relaxed in this nook. And then these views out to the green space provide biophilic boosts, i.e. connection to nature. The natural soft materials used to construct the nook are pleasing to touch, and this space was being designed with no volatile organic compounds, so the air quality would be good, and these materials would be sustainably sourced so that they have low carbon footprints. So another example of a feature, this time a cluster feature, could be a curved wall. So in a corridor, when you're moving between one space and another in a cluster, you might look at having a curved wall, which could be clad in pine cladding. And this has a very pleasing visual appearance, but it's more than that. The curved design actually reduces or minimizes the reduction in natural light that you would have otherwise if you just right-angled off this corridor and suddenly narrowed it down. You'd actually have less natural light coming into the corridor from the adjacent doors, so it would kind of get blocked. And the flow of that kind of curve provides more of a sort of pleasing flow of space, which supports mental well-being. And because it's constructed from natural timber that's got low carbon footprint, and it can be sustainably sourced, and it's pleasing to the touch. Another room feature might be a bedroom sanctuary. So when you're designing these student bedrooms, students will be busy a lot of the time, meeting people, talking to people, studying, traveling, blah, blah, blah. So when they come home to their room, they want a sanctuary where they can recharge. And so creating a sanctuary for the bedroom is really important. And by creating walls which provide high levels of acoustic separation, that can aid peaceful sleep and relaxation. By having windows in the rooms which connect the residents to the outdoors, and preferably a view of trees or green space, then that can provide natural light, sunlight, serotonin boost, circadian with rhythm connection, and the biophilic connection. By using fabrics on the bed, such as natural cottons and linens that can provide skin and thermal comfort. By designing this space using sustainably sourced materials, we're reducing the carbon footprints, the environmental impact, and those materials don't have any volatile organic compounds, so keeping the air quality high. And then the color scheme can be designed to have calming colors, which are good for relaxation and sleep. Another example of a space you might often have in a student building is a community kitchen. And community kitchens can be designed as socially interactive spaces that really support the community by designing islands that allow people to chop their food, cook their food opposite each other while standing at the island and have a conversation and get to know each other. And then these islands can be designed to be close proximity to tables where they eat, so everyone can kind of see and talk to each other. And this adaptable space can allow for a range of different social activities to take place. By placing this community kitchen next to a large bank of floor-to-ceiling height windows in this example, you're really maximizing the natural light that people have in that space, thereby doing all of the good things we've talked about before. And then again, designing everything from sustainable materials will help to create a low carbon environment. And then another feature of shared living buildings, and definitely student living, which is really, really good to have and can have a massive impact on community and sustainability, is a shared laundry space. So the shared laundry space basically allows residents to use a centralized laundry for washing their clothes, which actually has a lot lower carbon footprint per person than if they all had individual washing machines and dryers. These washing machines are also bigger, more efficient than the smaller individual ones would be, because they all come to use the washing machines. They then hang out together in this space, and there's some seats, as you can see here, and they'll get to know each other and form community and connection. And this combination of basically a functional requirement with a socially interactive feature is something that we really strongly promote at Well Studio, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So here we come on to now chapter 2, facilitating social interaction. So this is what I was going to just mentioning now. So going with the flow. So basically, people rotate, circulate around a building when they're living in a building, and they go to different places and naturally to do different things. And then at those different places doing different things, they might meet other people. And this is also known in the kind of movies as meet cute points. So, you know, it's that kind of like stereotypical Hollywood movie where some girl drops her books on the top of the stairs and a guy picks them up for her. Oh, hi. And they start chatting. And then that's like a romance. But it doesn't have to be a romance. It can just be any kind of meeting where people get to know each other. But thinking about buildings in that way as potential opportunities for meeting points is how we work with the design of shared living spaces and shared living buildings at Well Studio. So looking at these movement paths, you can trace these through the buildings, and you can look at where they cross over, you can look at where people stop, and then you can identify certain points within the building. And then you can basically augment these already existing points with additional socially interactive elements, like a seat next to the mailboxes. So rather than just checking your mailbox and then you've got sort of, that's it, you've got to go out of that space. If you have a bench, you know, someone can be waiting for someone else to check their mail, and while that's happening, they might meet someone else and say hi. And before you know it, you've created a little opportunity for social interaction at a very low cost. Or, you know, as part of a staircase, you've got naturally a nook underneath the stair. How about making that into a little seat where someone can read a book and interact as someone else is coming down the stairs? When people naturally have to go and lock up their bikes outside, you can have a bench and some opportunity again for conversation. And in student living in particular, there are larger spaces within the building that can facilitate this. So for instance, a study area, and here you can see a study area with a combination of different styles of seating and different sizes of space. So on one side, you've got these private nooks where people can sit opposite each other and have conversation. And then in the middle, you've got this larger desks and tables where people can actually work and then have a larger space for interaction. And then by the window, these softer elements of seating. So different types of seating, allowing different forms of interaction can be really good. And then the shared kitchen, another place where you just have a natural functional requirement, which is eating and cooking, and then you facilitate interaction by having chairs and tables and islands of people facing each other, as I've said. Laundry, and we talked about, and then the student bar, basically people can come together there and they're having a drink in the evening to relax, but they're meeting other people and they're talking. So what's the conclusion? So the conclusion is, consider how you can augment the natural movement paths and practical need points of students with additional design elements which support social interaction. Right, so now we're going to come on to the next little area, which is called the dimensions of community. So the dimensions of community is really all about how people interact using their senses. So you've got your eyes to see, you've got your ears to hear, and you can touch as well, and the other senses. So basically, thinking about a building in terms of that is very interesting for community. So here on the right hand side, you can see a closed floor plan. So in this floor plan, basically someone in that dining room and the orange dot, you can't really see anyone else that easily because there's doors everywhere. So you're in there, and unless someone comes into that room, you're basically not even going to know that they're there in the house. Whereas if you wanted to create more opportunity for social interaction, what you would do is you would get rid of these doors in between that kitchen area and the hallway and family zone. And then basically you would have that visual connection. So if someone's cooking, they can see someone that's dining. If someone's cooking, they can see someone that's lounging in the family room, and they can even see someone coming in to the house. So immediately you're increasing the likelihood of social interaction taking place. Now, obviously in private areas, you actually don't want to have open plan. You want to have closed plan and private spaces which provide sanctuary and acoustic and visual separation. But then in community spaces, you might want to open it out more. And so it's good to think about the building in these terms. So the visual range of connection is between 0 and 22 meters. So then you've got the verbal range of connection. So verbal communication. Also, there's a kind of science of this called proxemics. And basically to have a conversation with somebody in a kind of quieter way, you need to be pretty close to them. So like 1.2 to 2.1 meters away. And then if you're going to raise your voice and shout more, then you'll probably want 2.1 to 3.7. But beyond 3.7, it's quite hard for people to hear each other. So you can see a couple of examples here of types of space. You see the one on the bottom, the community kitchen, two people sitting opposite each other on the table. They'd obviously be going for close verbal. But then if they were talking to someone at the islands behind where people are cooking, that'd be far verbal. And then in the above example of people playing pool and table football, I believe, that's kind of all close verbal, basically. Then you've got togetherness and touch. So obviously in more intimate situations, romantic, or if you just know each other really well, you'd get into the close verbal touch range. So then you can have nooks that facilitate close verbal and touch. Togetherness as well, sorry. And that can be really good to design into shared spaces as well, to allow for that kind of thing. And also for parents who need to be close to their children. So what's the conclusion? So the conclusion is when designing, consider the 3 types of connection: visual, verbal, and touch, togetherness, and their distances in your building. So now we come on to the kind of final part of this chapter, to do with social interaction, the law of increasing social interaction, also known as why does everybody end up in the kitchen at a party? So when I was living in London, I still am, went to a lot of parties, as you might do. And basically what seemed to happen at the party, like your average house party, I mean, is that you've got someone's home, okay? And you've got all these different spaces. They probably got a lounge, they probably got another space, they probably got space outdoors even, where you'd think that people would hang out. But what seems to happen, funnily enough, is that everyone ends up in the kitchen. And why is that? Because the kitchen is not really that comfortable space. There's no chairs in the kitchen. But what happens is they go in there because they need to do something, right? Like get another drink, get a beer, get some food, wash something up, find something, find more cutlery, knives or forks or glasses or something. So they go, there's a need why they go into the kitchen. And then while they're in the kitchen, basically someone else comes into the kitchen and starts talking to them. And because it's a party, they will start talking back, and then that happens times X, times X, times X. So it kind of builds up where basically everyone's gone in there for some reason, but then they end up staying there. And then other people in the party are saying, well, where is everybody? And they go to look for them and they find them all in the kitchen. So how can we use this kind of sort of law of social interaction to facilitate community in shared living spaces? Well, why not design a space like this, which is could be a shared space in a student cluster, which has a number of different functional reasons why one might need to go there, like route from the entrance through to the garden. So they've got to go through that space to get to the garden, or going to make a cup of tea, or going in there to make dinner, going in there to sit on the sofa and do something on their laptop. Maybe there are other functions you might design into this space. So if you design kind of enough functions into a space, it means that people are more likely to end up talking to each other in that space. So someone goes in to make a cup of tea, someone else comes in, they end up chatting, someone else comes in, they end up chatting. Then the more people that are in there, the more likelihood it is that someone else is going to come in while they're there, because they're staying there longer. Plus this kind of magnetic effect of, as I say, people looking for each other. So then you get more people hanging out in the kitchen. Then before you know it, it gets to dinner time and they all end up making dinner together and having dinner together. So there you have an organically formed community. So what's the conclusion? Look to create community spaces which combine many functions together: kitchen, dining, living spaces, garden access, and encourage the law of increasing social interaction. So that's the end of the social interaction chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. And now we are going to come on to the final chapter of the webinar this afternoon, which is about looking at some specific student living examples and some best practice, which hopefully reflects some of the things we've been talking about. So here, the first example we have for you is the Carlton Hill project. This is a new student living project in Carlton Hill in London, in the UK. And basically, this project has been designed to support well-being for the students. So they have looked at various things that support well-being. We hadn't mentioned it yet, but this is another element, that the floor to ceiling height of a space which you're in, i.e. the volume of the space, the greater that is, the better the feeling of well-being. So here they've, the size of the building was expanded by up to 25%, floor to ceiling heights were added, as well as amenities. So they added some amenities, rooftop garden and a ground floor gym. So again, supporting physical well-being, supporting mental well-being with the garden and the gym. They used a soft and warm color palette. So this harmonious color palette that's pleasing to the eye and calming to the mind for the students. They also created in the individual bedrooms, the ceilings are painted with a pattern to create a warm, homely atmosphere, while also generating a colored effect to the overall facade of the building, particularly at night. So providing that kind of sanctuary in the bedroom visually was also added in, and this really nice environment with a lot of connection to nature around the edge. And then you can see some more elements. So you've got this roof garden on the roof, which is a really good space for people to go have a connection to nature with the plants. Maybe they can have some gardening days there and hang out and read a book and be in the sunshine. And also it will facilitate community interaction, social interaction through all these activities. Internally, they've designed a biophilic green wall. So again, big connection to nature and a well-being boost, natural stone-clad walls and timber cladding, reduced carbon footprints, and connection to nature. And the balconies having planting, also providing connection to nature and well-being boost. And then this large glazed area of sunlight directly coming into this atrium space, which is also a circulation route to go to all the different units, gives connection to sunlight, which gives a serotonin boost, and the circadian rhythm, natural connection to the circadian rhythm of the sky, which is supporting well-being. Here you've got a space from the next example we're showing, which is the social hub, what used to be known as the student hotel. But the social hub is a really cool kind of hybrid between co-living and student living, where basically you've got a lot of great design community spaces. So they really score highly on the community aspect of shared living. And some of the features are the bedrooms operates, as well as bedrooms, the social hub operates co-working spaces and shared community and living and dining spaces. And these kind of spaces work together to allow building users to study, live, and play at the social hub. Social hubs co-working spaces attract local business owners and entrepreneurs, and they also welcome digital nomads and private guests, all of whom mix with the students, creating a thriving community city hub, because these are basically placed in the center of cities, which brings new innovations and inspirational conversations. And think about all the great ideas, even in terms of innovation in what the students are studying, and I know researching, just that come through these kind of conversations. And then there are also communal facilities within the social hub, such as laundries, kitchens, meeting areas, study areas, gyms, swimming pools, and bars. So they've gone big on the amount of amenities and different kinds of amenities. So students have a really great lifestyle, and the design is modern, it's striking, it's colorful, playful, and it has a vibrant, inviting appearance. And you can see some of the examples of indoor spaces here, just calling out different elements. So here you see on the left, this kind of double height space, really great because you've got different seating areas, different types of seating areas within this space, and they can observe each other and see what each other is up to. So you've got that kind of Romeo and Juliet balcony effect. And then, but upstairs is a bit more protected, a bit more intimate. So people that want to have more intimate conversations might naturally go up there. So it allows for a range of different conversation, different sizes of groups to use the space. Also notice biophilic design, indoor planting, connection to nature. On the right-hand side, decking, and different levels of an outdoor space, which again facilitate different kinds of interaction. So kind of like higher deck with little tables, lower deck, more little tables, two different areas next to swimming pool. There's different kind of interaction, and then the kind of like lounging area. So yeah, there's variations, different sizes of space and functions of space are really good. And then the final example on student living for today is the Giles Hill at Monash University. So this basically has a lot of sustainable design features. So what they've done here is they've built the most of the building, I believe, out of cross-laminated timber, which is, if you're growing that from renewable forests, that's a pretty damn sustainable material. And if you then combine that with good insulation, could be natural insulation like sheep's wool or hempcrete insulation, etc., and then you take that all up and have really good U values and low energy walls, which keep the rooms really warm, and then you combine that with mechanical ventilation, so that your air changes per hour is controlled and you're not losing heat needlessly, but it's making sure the space is well ventilated to human requirements. Then you get a really low energy need, so it hardly needs anything to heat these kinds of buildings, and you're getting into what they call passive house level, or very net zero carbon level. So that means, you're almost getting down to the fact that people's own body heat heats up the space, and they hardly that much heating is required. And then, but also another reason why that's possible is the facade, which has a lot of these shades, solar shades on it, so to reduce heat gain. So basically, you think buildings are all about underheating or like needing heating to heat them up, but there's also a massive problem with overheating and then needing air conditioning to cool them down. So by reducing the heat gains in the summer using solar shading, you can really do that as well and reduce the needs for the building. And then internally, what's really nice is that basically says the CLT, cross-laminated timber, is also kind of then brought internally so that you see it visually, and it's got a really nice visual appearance because it's obviously connecting people to nature because it's wood. And then outside you've got views over this beautiful parkland around the building. So that's pretty much it for today. I hope you've really enjoyed watching this webinar. Just to reiterate again, if you want to find out more about what we do, please go to worldstudiocoliving.com, and we work with developers, investors, operators of student living buildings in the UK, in Europe, globally. And we have a whole range of services you can see on our website that we can bring to the table to help you to find the right building, develop the building that you want for student living, and really make it work in terms of sustainability, well-being, and community. So please do get in touch, follow us on Instagram, and add me on LinkedIn, and happy to take the conversation further and chat to you. And that's really the end of today. And thank you so much for joining. And we look forward to being in touch soon.